The first time Aaron Thorne saw the meteor that was not a meteor, he was 8 years old and standing barefoot on the sand-swept balcony of his family's cliffside home. The sky was a deep violet, the last remnants of dusk fading into a star-choked night, when the streak of burning white cut across the horizon with a sound like tearing metal. His father had rushed out beside him, steadying a hand on Aaron's shoulder as the incandescent streak grew brighter, then abruptly veered in a way no natural falling stone ever could. Aaron remembered the way his father's voice had caught, how he whispered something under his breath that Aaron was not meant to hear. It was only years later that Aaron understood the meaning of that hushed statement. Not again. The adults of the colony never talked openly about the visitors beyond the outer ring of human settlements, but their tension had been woven into Aaron's childhood like a thread beneath a tapestry. He could sense it in the sharp glances exchanged during council meetings, in the stockpiling of fuel cells and rations, and in the quiet drills his mother led every few months under the guise of emergency preparedness. The world of Kairun was a frontier, beautiful and perilous, wrapped in silver forests and blue-gold seas, but its isolation meant it was vulnerable. Those who settled here traded safety for freedom, and no one felt the weight of that bargain more than the adults who had come from worlds already scarred by interstellar turmoil. By the time Aaron reached adulthood, no one spoke of meteors anymore. They spoke of trespassers, shadows, and watchers, and they spoke of humanity's stubborn refusal to yield. It was the latter that shaped Aaron into who he eventually became, though he did not know at the age of 8 that the trajectory of his life had already shifted, following the same inexplicable curve as the object that had fallen from the heavens. 2 decades passed before he saw such a sight again, but by then he was ready. Kairun's northern continent was a mosaic of ridged valleys and crystalline plains, where the wind carried scents unlike anywhere else in human-settled space. Aaron had spent the better part of his 28th year surveying these lands as part of the Kairun Frontier Corps, a civilian organization that prided itself on maintaining independence from the larger human alliances. The Frontier Corps valued resilience, adaptability, and above all, self-reliance. Aaron had joined partly out of a desire to serve, but also because he could not shake the memory of the quiet dread on his father's face those many years ago. On a gusty morning tinged with silver mist, Aaron stood beside his Sandrunner vehicle, gloved hands, adjusting a sensor beacon lodged among a cluster of jagged slate. The beacon had been flickering intermittently for several weeks, its signal occasionally disrupted by something in the atmosphere. Technical malfunctions were common in the frontier, but Aaron had learned long ago that technology rarely failed without cause. His instincts told him something was off. He brushed dust from the beacon's interface and input a diagnostic code. The device hummed to life, displaying a grid of green lines and stable readings. Yet just as he began to relax, the display flickered again, shifting from green to amber, then momentarily to a deep, pulsing crimson. Aaron frowned. Crimson was an anomaly flag normally reserved for extreme and immediate threats. Weather disturbances, seismic shifts, and wildlife migrations could cause amber fluctuations, but crimson indicated something intentionally interfering with the signal. He tapped a command to reset the beacon. Instead of recalibrating, the display brightened into a chaotic lattice of spirals and symbols Aaron did not recognize. They resembled neither human script nor the geometric patterns used in military-grade encryption. He reached for his ComSet to report the anomaly, but before he could speak, the sky above him split open. A streak of fiery gold blazed across the firmament, trailing a shimmering residue that rippled like liquid glass. It moved far too quickly, too deliberately, to be any kind of natural phenomenon. Aaron watched in astonishment as the object curved downward in a sweeping arc, heading not toward the distant mountain ranges, but toward the very plateau where he stood. His heart hammered against his ribs. Memories from childhood surged within him, the sound of tearing metal, the blinding light, the fear etched into the faces of adults who thought they were hiding it. Aaron vaulted into the Sandrunner and activated its shielding canopy as the object descended. The impact struck several kilometers away, but the shockwave tore across the plateau with enough force to send shards of loose slate flying like shrapnel. The Sandrunner rocked violently, its stabilizers whining in protest. Aaron gritted his teeth and steadied himself as the worst of the tremors passed. When the dust finally settled, he forced the canopy open and surveyed the horizon. A column of prismatic smoke unfurled into the sky, its colors shifting between hues Aaron had no names for. He wrestled with the decision forming in his mind. Protocol demanded he report the incident and wait for reinforcements. Logic insisted he keep a safe distance. Every instinct in his body, however, urged him forward. Aaron had spent years preparing for such a moment, even if he had never admitted it out loud. Whatever had fallen from the sky was not a meteor, and he doubted it was debris from a passing vessel. He secured the Sandrunner's canopy and set a course toward the crash site. As the vehicle sped across the windswept plateau, Aaron felt the land around him shift in subtle ways. The chime trees that dotted the horizon seemed quieter than usual, their crystalline leaves stilling rather than singing in the breeze. The flocks of skywings that often soared above the ravine were nowhere to be seen. Even the air tasted different, carrying a metallic tang that prickled against his tongue. Kairun was responding to whatever had arrived, and so was he. The crash site lay within a shallow basin carved by centuries of gentle erosion. As Aaron brought the Sandrunner to a halt at the rim, he peered down, expecting to see broken metal, scattered debris, perhaps the remnants of a vessel. Instead, he saw something wholly unfamiliar. The object was smooth, elliptical, and almost organic in its seamless curvature. Its surface pulsed faintly, like the exhale of a slumbering creature. Shards of iridescent material were embedded in the surrounding soil, each piece emitting a low resonance that vibrated through Aaron's chest. He descended the slope cautiously, scanning the area for movement. The air grew warmer as he approached the object, and faint ripples of energy shimmered across its surface. He reached out, compelled by equal parts curiosity and caution, when a sudden fissure cracked open along the object's side. Aaron leapt back, drawing the stunpike from his belt. A pale light spilled from the fissure, accompanied by a wave of spine-tingling static. Something was emerging. At first, Aaron saw only a silhouette, tall and slender, its limbs elongated beyond human proportions. The figure staggered forward, collapsing onto the crystalline soil with a sound like shattering light. Aaron approached slowly, stunpike raised. The figure lay motionless, its body trembling with faint pulses of luminescence. It was injured, possibly dying. Against his better judgment, Aaron knelt beside it. The being's skin was smooth and cool, mirroring the crash object's iridescent sheen. Its face was humanoid in structure, though its eyes were closed and its breathing shallow. Aaron hesitated only a moment before activating the emergency medpack he kept at his waist. He had trained for injuries caused by wildlife or environmental hazards, not for treating wounded extraterrestrials. Still, doing nothing felt unacceptable. He extended a diagnostic probe over the being's chest. The probe flickered erratically, unable to process the physiology before it. Aaron muttered a curse under his breath and switched tactics, applying a regenerative sealant to what he hoped were surface wounds. The being stirred, its eyes opening. Aaron froze. The creature's eyes were unlike anything he had ever seen, multi-layered, refracting light into shifting patterns that hummed with intelligence. It reached out with trembling fingers, brushing Aaron's wrist. A surge of imagery flooded Aaron's mind. Stars collapsing into spirals, vast fleets drifting in shadowed space, worlds burning beneath dark shapes that blotted out entire constellations. Then the vision shifted, revealing something else. Human ships, human colonies, human resistance. The images dissolved as abruptly as they had appeared, leaving Aaron gasping. The being's voice entered his mind, faint but resolute. "You must warn them." Aaron shook his head, struggling to regain clarity. "Warn who? About what?" The being tried to rise but collapsed again. "They come, the devourers of will, the shapers of mind. They seek your kind for conquest or for extinction." Aaron felt his blood run cold. He searched the being's face for answers, for clarification, but before he could speak again, the ground beneath them trembled. It was brief, barely a shudder, but it was unmistakably deliberate, not seismic, not natural. The being's eyes widened in alarm. "They followed me." Aaron tensed, scanning the horizon. The air thickened, warping subtly as though unseen waves were distorting the space around them. A distant hum grew steadily louder, resonating across the basin. The being grasped Aaron's arm with sudden urgency. "You must flee. They will not permit you to live." Aaron grit his teeth. "I am not leaving you here." The being shook its head weakly. "You do not understand. They do not simply end life. They unravel it." The hum intensified, becoming a dissonant vibration that rattled Aaron's bones. He hauled the being upright, supporting its fragile frame against his shoulder. "Then we move, now." The slopes of the basin felt steeper than before, each step dragging against Aaron's resolve. The hum became a roar, the sky darkened, and then he saw them. They materialized along the basin's rim, tall, angular figures clad in armor that seemed grown rather than forged. Their bodies radiated an oppressive aura, as though the air recoiled from their presence. Their helms had no visible visors, no openings for eyes, yet Aaron felt their attention lock onto him with chilling precision. One lifted an arm, its limbs splitting open to reveal a lattice of shifting dark matter. Energy crackled. The wounded being in Aaron's arms shuddered. "Run." Aaron did. He sprinted toward the Sandrunner, lungs burning, the weight of the being slowing his pace. A blast of warped energy struck the ground nearby, erupting in a burst of searing heat and gravitational distortion. The shockwave hurled Aaron sideways, sending him tumbling across jagged stone. Pain flared through his ribs. The being was torn from his grasp, rolling limply across the basin floor. Aaron staggered upright, vision swimming. Another blast followed, narrowly missing him. The armored entity advanced down the slope with terrifying speed. Aaron's gaze flicked to the being, now struggling weakly to rise. He made a choice. Summoning every ounce of strength, Aaron sprinted not toward the Sandrunner, but toward the nearest fallen shard of iridescent material. He wrenched it from the soil and hurled it toward the advancing figure. The shard struck the entity's chest, fracturing into shimmering dust. The entity recoiled, its movements glitching in a jarring stutter. The being on the ground cried out in warning. "Do not strike them with the shards. They absorb, they adapt." Aaron cursed and dove aside as the entity recovered, its form now pulsing with the same iridescent color as the shard. It was learning, evolving. The being motioned weakly to Aaron. "Your vehicle. Go." Aaron bolted toward the Sandrunner once more. Another blast tore past him, scorching the soil. He slid behind the canopy and activated the engine with a frantic command. The vehicle roared to life. Aaron swerved it toward the injured being. The Sandrunner braked sharply beside it, and Aaron reached out, pulling the being onto the passenger platform. The armored entities fired simultaneously. Aaron slammed his palm on the acceleration control. The Sandrunner surged forward, narrowly dodging a concussive blast that vaporized the ground behind them. The vehicle sped across the plateau, racing toward the crystalline ravine that marked the boundary of the frontier. Aaron risked a glance over his shoulder. The figures did not pursue on foot. Instead, they raised their arms. The sky shimmered, and then the world filled with shadow. Three angular craft descended from above, sleek, predatory shapes that moved like living weapons. Aaron felt dread sink into his bones. He tightened his grip on the controls. "Hold on," he whispered to the being, though he doubted it could hear him. The chase had begun, and humanity, whether it knew it or not, had entered a new war. The wind howled across the crystalline ravine as Aaron piloted the Sandrunner at full thrust, its stabilizers straining against the uneven terrain. The ravine walls rose on either side in jagged arcs of shimmering mineral, their facets reflecting distorted images of the three shadow craft descending in predatory formation. Aaron had never seen anything move with such lethal precision. Each craft shifted in perfect sync with the others, as though directed by a singular mind. The wounded being behind him clutched the railing of the passenger platform, its breathing shallow and uneven, its eyes flickering with weakening luminescence. Aaron could feel the heat radiating from its body despite the frigid air whipping around them. The vehicle's display pulsed red as it picked up gravitational distortions forming above. Aaron knew he had only seconds before the shadow craft fired their next barrage. He veered sharply left, narrowly avoiding a spiraling bolt of warped energy that crashed into the ravine's right wall, erupting in a burst of fragmented light. Debris cascaded down, pelting the Sandrunner's canopy with shards of glittering mineral. Aaron gritted his teeth and accelerated. The ravine widened ahead, opening into a stretch of fractured land known as the Shatterplain, a landscape treacherous but offering more maneuvering space. "Stay with me," Aaron called back to the being, though he did not know if it understood. The being's eyes cracked open. "They will not cease. You must find refuge among your own kind." Aaron's jaw tightened. "There is a relay outpost 2 leagues north. If we can reach it, we can warn the Frontier Corps and get help for you." The being tried to speak, but winced in pain. Aaron focused on the path ahead. The Shatterplain was a chaotic labyrinth of splintered glass-like ridges and jagged spires that jutted from the ground like the teeth of a buried colossus. It was considered nearly impassable at high speeds, but Aaron knew this region well. He had trained long hours here to master evasive maneuvers, though never under circumstances as dire as these. The Sandrunner leapt over a fractured ridge, landing with a jolt that rattled Aaron's bones. The shadow craft closed in, their surfaces rippling with the same iridescence the armored entities had absorbed from the shards. They were not merely vessels, they were extensions of the entities themselves, evolving with each encounter, learning with every strike. Aaron swerved between 2 massive crystal outcroppings just as the lead craft fired a beam that splintered the ground behind them into a molten crater. The heat washed over Aaron's back, and he felt the vehicle's plating bubble under the intense pressure. A warning alarm blared. The being behind him stirred weakly. "They seek knowledge, they harvest minds. My escape drew them across the void, but if they seize you, they will know your kind." Aaron's grip tightened on the controls. "Then they are not getting me." Ahead, the Shatterplain dipped into a series of narrow fissures dangerous, but they offered a chance to break the enemy's line of sight. Aaron angled the Sandrunner downward and plunged into the fissures. The walls rushed around them in a blur of iridescent stone as the craft descended into the maze-like undergrowth of crystalline cliffs. Aaron leaned deeply into the turns, guiding the vehicle through twisting corridors that grew narrower with each passing second. The shadow craft attempted to follow, but their wingspan was too broad. The first craft clipped a jagged ridge, spiraling into the stone and detonating in a flare of warped energy. Aaron flinched at the brightness, but pressed onward. The remaining 2 craft adjusted, shifting their shape. Their wings folded inward, their bodies elongating as though made of malleable dark matter. They slipped into the fissure after him. Aaron's heart pounded. "These things could adapt instantly. Can you shield us in any way?" he called to the being. The being shook its head faintly. "My strength diminished. The crossing drained too much." Aaron cursed under his breath and scanned for a route. A narrow tunnel opened on the left, barely wide enough for the Sandrunner. It descended steeply, but it curved away from the shadow craft's firing trajectory. Aaron turned sharply, sparks flying as the vehicle scraped against both walls. A blast from behind illuminated the tunnel, searing the air where Aaron's head had been moments before. "Almost there, hold on," Aaron muttered to both himself and the being. The tunnel spat them out onto a lower plane streaked with luminous veins of crystallized mineral. The two remaining shadow craft burst from the tunnel moments later, continuing the pursuit without hesitation. Aaron pushed the Sandrunner to its limit. The engine gave a tortured whine, but the vehicle surged forward. He could see, just at the edge of the horizon, the faint silhouette of the relay outpost rising from the plains, a latticework tower designed to amplify long-range communications. If he could reach it, he could call for reinforcements. The being behind him shifted. Your people will not withstand them unless they unite. Aaron shot a brief glance over his shoulder. We can unite. Humanity does it when backed into a corner. You do not understand. These pursuers do not conquer through strength alone. They infiltrate thought, unravel identity, reshape minds into their own image. They extinguish resistance before it is born. They call themselves. The being's voice broke with pain, but Aaron felt a faint echo of meaning press against his mind. Not a word, not a name, but a presence cold, deliberate, devouring. Then darkness shimmered around the craft above. Aaron looked skyward and felt his breath hitch. The two remaining shadow craft had reorganized, merging into a single larger vessel. Its hull rippled with undulating patterns as it drew power from the remnants of its fallen counterpart. A deep resonance pulsed through the air, vibrating Aaron's bones. The fused craft fired. The beam slammed into the ground mere meters behind the Sandrunner, vaporizing a section of the plane. The explosion launched a shockwave that hurled the vehicle forward. Aaron nearly lost control, but managed to wrench the steering bars back into alignment. The outpost was closer, now a skeletal tower rising from the land like a beacon of frayed hope. But the Sandrunner's engine began to sputter, warning lights flashing. The blast had damaged the internal stabilizers. Aaron gritted his teeth. Come on, not yet, not now. The being raised a trembling hand, placing it against the vehicle's frame. A faint ripple of energy spread along the plating, steadying the engine's pulse. The stabilizers flickered back into balance. Aaron shot the being a look of grateful astonishment. The being gave a weak, humorless smile. A small aid, I can offer no more. The shadow craft fired again. This beam struck the ground ahead, forcing Aaron to veer sharply to avoid plummeting into the resulting crater. The relay outpost loomed just a few hundred meters away. Aaron reached toward the ComSet at his belt. If he could activate the outpost's emergency override, he could send a broadwave distress call to every settlement on Run. He just needed a few seconds. The shadow craft descended rapidly, its form elongating into a spear-shaped silhouette poised to strike. Aaron pushed the Sandrunner harder, feeling the engine strain beyond redline. The outpost's perimeter pylons flashed as they detected the incoming vehicle. The shadow craft fired a continuous beam this time, a focused line of annihilation that carved across the plain behind Aaron, gaining on him. Aaron felt the heat gnaw at his back as the beam drew closer. He slammed the brakes and leapt from the Sandrunner, pulling the being with him as the vehicle surged forward on its final momentum. The Sandrunner skidded across the plain and struck the base of the outpost tower. The impact triggered the emergency override, and the tower's systems roared to life. Energy conduits lit up the central spire. The being collapsed beside Aaron, too weak to stand. Aaron gathered it in his arms and staggered toward the tower's access hatch. The shadow craft hovered overhead, charging for another strike. Aaron slammed his hand onto the access panel. The door slid open. He dragged the being inside and sealed the hatch just as the beam crashed into the outer pylons. The impact shook the entire structure. The interior lights flickered. The tower was not built to withstand direct assault. Aaron carried the being up the narrow stairwell toward the broadcast deck. Each step felt heavier than the last. The being's pulse weakened against his arm. You must warn your world, it whispered. They will spread across the stars. They will consume every free mind. I will warn them, Aaron said through clenched teeth. I promise. The broadcast deck opened into a wide chamber lined with crystalline amplification nodes. Aaron set the being down gently, then rushed to the central control console. He activated the beacon. A deep hum resonated through the tower as energy surged upward, amplifying the signal. Static filled the air. Aaron entered the emergency code. A column of blue light erupted from the tower's apex, spiraling into the atmosphere. The distress call burst outward across Run. Aaron caught his breath, then the ceiling trembled. The shadow craft slammed into the outpost, tearing through the upper lattice. Shards of metal and crystal rained down. A horrid screeching sound filled the chamber as the craft forced its way inside, reshaping its form to penetrate the interior. Aaron stepped in front of the being, stun pike drawn. The craft's hull split open, revealing an armored entity within. It dropped to the floor, towering over Aaron, its body now enhanced with the shimmering iridescence it had absorbed. It moved with terrifying grace, each step deliberate. Aaron held his ground. "If you want us," he said, "you will have to get through me." The entity extended an arm. Its limb split open, revealing the lattice of dark matter preparing to fire. Aaron lunged forward, ramming the stun pike into the creature's torso. The weapon's charge flared. The entity convulsed, but instead of collapsing, it absorbed the energy. Aaron's eyes widened. The creature straightened, now glowing faintly with the stolen power. It struck Aaron with the force of a tidal wave. He flew backward, smashing into the crystalline amplification nodes. Pain exploded through him. The being cried out with the last of its strength. The entity turned toward it. Aaron struggled to rise, his vision blurred. He saw the being lift a trembling hand. A faint flicker of light formed at its palm, weak, unstable but concentrated. "Aaron," it whispered, "forgive me." The light burst outward. It struck the armored entity directly, not with force but with disruption. The iridescent patterns on its body unraveled. The creature staggered, its form glitching violently. Aaron forced himself up, seized a fractured amplification shard, and drove it into the entity's core as it faltered. This time, the shard did not strengthen it. The being's disruptive energy had stripped its adaptive abilities. The creature convulsed, then shattered into fragments of darkened matter. Aaron collapsed, gasping. He turned to the being. Its light was fading rapidly. He crawled to its side. "Stay with me, help is coming." The being shook its head gently. "My purpose was to warn, to flee so others might resist. You have done what I could not." "You can still survive," Aaron insisted. "We can treat you, we can." The being raised a hand to his cheek. "Your kind fights with fire, with will, with defiance. That is why they fear you, that is why they come." Aaron's throat tightened. "Tell me how to stop them." The being's eyes softened. "You cannot stop them alone." Its luminous gaze dimmed further. "But humanity together may yet rise." The light in its eyes extinguished. Aaron bowed his head. The tower trembled again. Outside, the merged shadow craft regrouped, its form swelling with dark energy as it repaired itself from the assault. It let out a resonance that shook the land. Aaron stood slowly. The broadcast had gone out. Reinforcements would come, but so would the enemy. Aaron stared at the remnants of the armored entity at his feet, fury rising in his chest. "This is our world," he said quietly. "We will not be devoured." He gathered the being's body in his arms. Outside, the shadow craft circled the tower like a vulture awaiting a dying quarry. Aaron lifted his gaze toward it with a resolve he had never felt before. If these invaders sought to unravel humanity, they would learn the same lesson every enemy had ever learned. Humans did not break quietly, and they did not fall alone. The storm that swept over the Shatterplane that night was unlike any natural weather Aaron had ever witnessed on Run. The sky twisted in roiling layers of indigo and molten gold, as though the atmosphere itself was reacting to the presence of the alien craft circling above the damaged relay outpost. Lightning streaked between the clouds in jagged forks, but the bolts made no sound when they struck the ground. Aaron suspected the storm was no accident. Something about the arrival of the enemy vessel had disrupted the balance of the land, triggering a response from the planet that mirrored the turmoil within him. He paced along the edge of the shattered broadcast deck, the being's lifeless body wrapped gently in a cloak he had kept folded in the compartment of the Sandrunner. His vehicle was gone, destroyed in the final approach to the tower, but the cloak had survived thanks to its placement within the low-scorch compartment. The body felt impossibly light in his arms, the luminescent sheen on its skin fading with each passing minute. Aaron could not bring himself to leave it unprotected, even as the outpost structure continued to tremble under the shifting weight of the damaged upper lattice. Reinforcements would arrive soon. They had to. The broadcast had gone out in full, and every settlement on Kaya Run would have received the signal. The Frontier Corps maintained rapid response teams for emergencies, and though Aaron doubted even they had prepared for an enemy like this, they would come. Still, he knew that the shadow craft hovering above would not allow him a peaceful wait. The vessel moved in slow spirals around the tower, its shape distorting as though constantly analyzing and shifting. Occasionally, a ripple passed through its hull, creating shifting patterns that reminded Aaron uncomfortably of the multicolored symbols that had flickered across the sensor beacon earlier that day. The being had said that the enemy harvested minds, reshaped them, consumed them. Aaron could not shake the memory of the armored entity's gaze, cold and devoid of emotion, and the way it had absorbed energy and adapted instantly. He felt exposed beneath the circling predator, like prey being toyed with. Aaron knew he could not remain in the open. He gently carried the being's body down the stairwell to the mid-level analysis chamber, a small room lined with consoles that once processed geological survey transmissions. The consoles were dark now, several of them cracked from earlier impacts, but the room was enclosed and shielded from direct attack. Aaron laid the body across a padded bench and stepped back. He placed a hand on the being's chest, feeling the stillness beneath his palm. "I will not let your warning be in vain," he murmured. He did not expect an answer. He straightened and forced himself to focus. Reinforcements needed to reach the outpost unhindered. Aaron scanned the consoles, locating an auxiliary system that had survived the damage. The outpost had a failsafe designed to project decoy signals across the surrounding plains to confuse incoming threats. It had never been used outside training scenarios, but perhaps it could distract the shadow craft long enough for help to arrive. Aaron activated the auxiliary control node. The crystalline panel flickered erratically before settling into a dim but stable glow. He initiated the decoy sequence. A soft vibration hummed through the structure as the system attempted to generate false energy signatures. A moment later, an unpleasant screech echoed from above. The shadow craft reacted instantly, shifting direction. Aaron peered at the ceiling where faint cracks ran through the lattice, more screeching. The craft was analyzing the decoy signals. Aaron hoped it would take time for the enemy to differentiate the real from the false, but he had little faith in that hope. The creatures had shown an unsettling ability to adapt at impossible speed. A sudden jolt shook the tower. Aaron stumbled against the wall, catching himself on a fractured console. Another jolt followed, then a low rumble. The shadow craft was attacking the foundation. Aaron ran to the narrow window slit carved into the chamber. Outside, he could see beams of warping energy carving into the ground around the tower, destabilizing the rock and causing fractures to spread rapidly. "They are trying to topple it," he muttered. If the tower collapsed, Aaron would be buried beneath it along with the being's body. Worse, the distress broadcast equipment would be destroyed. Reinforcements would arrive blindly, unaware of the enemy lurking nearby. Aaron forced his racing thoughts to slow. He needed to act. The enemy craft had merged from multiple entities. The being had said they were guided by a collective will. Aaron wondered if that meant that destroying one part of the whole would weaken the others. The thought did little to comfort him, but it provided a spark of strategy. He climbed back to the upper deck, despite the trembling structure, each step sending small clouds of crystal dust drifting into the stairwell. The storm outside illuminated the world in brief flashes, revealing the massive craft swooping low along the perimeter. Aaron gripped a shard of fractured amplification crystal he had taken from the broadcast chamber. The shard had proven effective earlier only when the being had destabilized the enemy's adaptive defenses. Aaron doubted he could replicate that effect alone, but he had little else to rely on. He scanned the area. Debris lay scattered from the earlier collision. Power conduits pulsed weakly, emitting flickers of unstable energy. Aaron's gaze settled on an exposed conduit that had been torn from the wall. It sparked violently, small arcs of raw current snapping in the air. He had an idea that was more impulse than logic, but desperation left him no room for caution. He drove the shard into the conduit. The crystal absorbed the current instantly, glowing brighter as the energy channeled into it. Aaron felt his hair rise on end as the air crackled. The shard vibrated in his grip, its edges humming with unstable charge. Aaron raised it toward the sky. The shadow craft swooped low again, a massive silhouette eclipsing the tower as it readied another blast. Aaron waited. His heartbeat synced with the vibration of the shard, the storm, the rhythmic pulse of the alien vessel. When the craft drifted close enough for him to see the shifting patterns on its hull, Aaron hurled the shard with all the strength he could muster. The crystals streaked through the air like a lance of electric light. It struck the underside of the craft and detonated in a burst of raw, unfocused energy. The blast did not destroy the vessel, but it disrupted its form. The hull twisted violently, shrinking and swelling in erratic patterns as the absorbed current overwhelmed its adaptive processes. A screech unlike anything Aaron had heard tore through the storm. The craft spiraled upward, momentarily losing control. Aaron did not waste time watching. He dashed back into the stairwell as the tower shuddered from the recoil of the craft's thrashing. He descended 3 levels before the entire structure let out a warning groan. Panels shook loose from the walls, shattering on the stairs. Dust and mineral fragments filled the air. Aaron shielded his face as he pushed onward. The tower was weakening rapidly. He needed to ensure reinforcements could locate the outpost. The main beacon had already broadcast the distress call, but Aaron wanted to increase the chance that they would hone in directly on his location. He reached the supply chamber near the base of the tower. Emergency flares were stored here, including long-range plasma markers capable of burning through the storm and sending a visible trail that could be seen from kilometers away. Aaron activated 2 of the markers and thrust them into the open air through a cracked side panel. The markers shot skyward like scorching comets, trailing streaks of incandescent red. If anyone was coming, they would see those signals. The ground shook again. Aaron braced himself as he heard the shadow craft return, its screech more furious now. The blast he had thrown at it had not crippled it for long. He needed a plan that would keep him alive until help arrived. His gaze drifted back toward the stairwell leading to the mid-level chamber where the being's body lay. He refused to abandon it. Whatever remnants of the enemy remained circling above, they would likely try to retrieve the being's body for whatever grotesque purposes they had. Aaron would not allow that. He rushed back toward the chamber and found the walls trembling harder now. Cracks spread through the ceiling like branching veins. Dust drifted across the floor in ghostly spirals. Aaron lifted the being's body again, ignoring the ache in his arms and ribs. He descended to the lowest level of the outpost, a reinforced maintenance substructure designed to withstand tremors. Light flickered across the walls from failing power cells. Aaron detected a faint humming below. The substructure housed a small terraformer battery used to stabilize environmental fluctuations in the outpost's immediate surroundings. It had barely enough energy left to power lights for a few minutes, but its shielding was formidable. Aaron maneuvered the being's body into the sheltered alcove beside the terraformer battery. The air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with scorched wiring. Aaron took a moment to steady his breathing. He heard the thunder of the shadow craft striking the tower above, tearing away entire sections. The storm outside intensified, or perhaps it simply mirrored the violence of the conflict. Aaron could no longer distinguish the difference. Then, beneath the chaos, a new sound emerged. A familiar rumble, the deep, resonant thrum of grav drives cutting through air. Reinforcements. Aaron hurried to the nearest access slit and peered through. Through swirling clouds of storm debris and streaks of sporadic lightning, he saw 3 frontier skimmers racing across the shatterplane, their grav drives leaving ripples in the crystalline terrain. The lead skimmer bore the insignia of the Kairun Vanguard Division. Aaron felt relief surge through him. They had arrived. But the shadowcraft saw them as well. It pivoted sharply away from the tower, stretching its form into a long lance-like shape as though preparing to impale the incoming skimmers. Aaron's heart lurched. The skimmers were fast, but the shadowcraft was faster. He seized a supply crate and smashed open the emergency weapons compartment. The contents were meager: 2 short-range pulse throwers, a vibro spear with insufficient charge, and a compact detonation sphere designed to clear rock obstructions. The detonation sphere caught Aaron's attention. It was small, but its core could release an incredibly concentrated burst, powerful enough to blast through crystalline rock. Against a vessel of this size, it would be little more than a stinging spark, unless he could place it precisely. Aaron grabbed the sphere and sprinted toward the stairwell. The tower shook violently again as a blast from the shadow craft shattered another section of the upper structure. Aaron climbed with urgency, lungs burning. Rain and dust mixed in the stairwell, creating slick patches that nearly sent him tumbling. He reached the top level, braced himself, and stepped back into the storm. The shadow craft swept low, accelerating toward the incoming skimmers. Aaron held the sphere in shaking hands. He activated the timer. The sphere hummed, its faint light growing brighter. He looked down. A narrow maintenance rail jutted from the edge of the tower, leading to a suspended antenna mast that extended partially into the air. The mast had been damaged earlier but remained upright. If Aaron could reach the end of the mast and leap onto the shadow craft as it swooped past, the idea was insane, reckless, possibly suicidal, but Aaron knew he had no alternative. He sprinted along the maintenance rail, ignoring the dizzying drop below. The wind whipped around him, nearly knocking him off balance. The antenna mast swayed under his weight. The shadow craft shifted trajectory, drawing nearer. Aaron crouched. The craft's massive form rushed toward him like a spear of living night. Aaron waited until the last possible moment, then leapt. The wind roared past him. He hit the side of the craft hard, gripping onto one of the strange grooves etched into its surface. The material felt neither metallic nor organic, something in between. The vessel screeched, twisting violently as it recognized the intrusion. Aaron activated the detonation sphere's magnetic lock and slammed it onto the shifting hull. The sphere clamped down. The timer blinked. Aaron pushed off with all his strength. He did not see where he fell. The world became a blur of storm, wind, and spiraling motion. Darkness swallowed him. A deafening boom tore through the sky. The shockwave clipped Aaron mid-fall, flipping him through the air. He hit the ground hard. Pain tore through his spine and shoulders as he rolled across shattered crystal. He gasped for breath. The sky above erupted in a pillar of fractured light as the detonation sphere triggered a collapse in the shadow craft's adaptive structure. The vessel convulsed, folding inward. Layers of its hull unraveled into spiraling fragments of dark matter that evaporated into the storm. The massive form broke apart and dissolved. Aaron lay still, chest heaving, as the remnants of the enemy vessel vanished into nothingness. Moments later, 3 skimmers arrived, surrounding the fallen structure of the tower. Frontier responders leapt from their vehicles, securing a perimeter around Aaron. Their voices blurred together as exhaustion pulled him downward. He tried to speak, to warn them of what awaited beyond the skies, but the words tangled on his tongue. He forced his eyes open long enough to see the commander step forward, kneel, and place a steady hand on his shoulder. "You are alive," she said. "That is enough for now." Aaron shook his head weakly. "No, it is only the beginning." His vision dimmed. The storm continued to rage above, as though the sky itself understood the truth Aaron carried. This enemy was only the first wave, and humanity was now in their sights. The vessel called Dawn's Answer dropped from its faster-than-light corridor with a violent lurch that rattled every panel in its spine and jarred the teeth of every human aboard. The shift from corridor space into normal space should have been smooth, almost gentle, like sliding out of a warm current into cool open waters. Instead, it felt jagged and wrong, as though something massive had caught the ship by its flanks and dragged it the rest of the way. The moment the distortions ceased, alarms lit the command deck in wide rings of crimson. The captain did not flinch. She had been standing with one hand braced on the upper rail, waiting for exactly this kind of unwelcome greeting. Instead, she lifted her chin and demanded a status report. The navigator squinted at his screens, muttering that the stars were not where they should be. For a heartbeat no one understood, until he corrected himself with trembling clarity. The stars were where they should be. It was the ship that had been pushed several thousand kilometers off its predicted emergence point, pushed with a force no human-engineered field could replicate. The helmsman cursed softly and asked if anything visible appeared on the sensors. The sensor operator answered before anyone else could speak, his voice sharp with disbelief. Something enormous was waiting for them. The crew turned their eyes to the main display as the vessel magnified the distant object. They saw metal plates the size of continents, merging into angles that no orbital habitat or normal warship would ever attempt. The structure looked less like a ship and more like a titanic fortress assembled by minds that had never cared for symmetry or aesthetics. It was as if the builders had simply willed matter into place and allowed it to harden into whatever shapes suited their purpose. A low ripple of dread moved through the command deck. The captain tightened her hands around the rail, though her voice remained steady. She ordered a full scan. The crew obeyed, and fresh waves of data rolled across their screens. The thing before them stretched wider than several moons placed edge to edge. Its hull emitted no heat signatures, no engine flares, no communication pulses. It seemed inert and lifeless, yet it was impossible to view without feeling as if something sentient behind those walls was staring back. The vessel's historian, who normally spoke only when directly asked, murmured that the object matched no records. Yet something about its layered hull patterns echoed the invaders the humans had encountered on warded path, the same impossible angles, the same suggestion that the builders had never learned craftsmanship, but had invented it on the fly. The ship's hull carried scars. Some were narrow gouges, others deep punctures that exposed inner chambers. These wounds were not recent. Their edges had cooled long ago. Whatever had damaged that fortress had done so in a battle older than any human civilization. The captain quietly ordered the ship into a slow circular drift, keeping maximum distance while collecting every reading possible. Dawn's answer complied, though its engines pulsed nervously, as if the ship itself objected to lingering near something so ancient and predatory. The communications officer spoke, reporting that although the fortress emitted nothing audible, there was still something registering on their lower bands. Not a signal, not a message, more like a pressure or a low hum just on the edge of perception. The crew shifted uneasily, some rubbing their temples. One officer said it felt like a voice not yet spoken, but preparing to speak. The captain asked engineering whether such a sensation could result from field disturbances around the fortress. Engineering replied that nothing about the readings made physical sense. The pressure fluctuated almost like a heartbeat, but not biological. The captain asked for an internal wellness check. Every department confirmed that crew members were anxious but unharmed. Dawn's answer maintained a stable life support envelope, but the psychologist on duty noted rising stress signatures across the ship. Even the automated systems were beginning to misreport minor functions. The captain made a calculated decision. She ordered the science team to take a remote probe and send it toward the fortress, skimming its outer hull. The probe's launch bay activated with a faint shudder, and a small golden sphere shot across the void. For several long minutes, the command deck watched its slow approach. The sphere drew close enough for its onboard cameras to begin sending detailed footage. As expected, the walls of the fortress were not uniform. Some areas displayed layered filigrees of metal that caught starlight and refracted it in unnatural directions. Other areas were jagged, broken, and hollow. Then the probe moved over a massive crack, stretching for nearly 100 kilometers. Its lights pierced the darkness. What shone back made everyone recoil. Inside the crack were petrified shapes, masses of hardened material twisted like limbs frozen mid-motion. They resembled neither machinery nor biology. The historian whispered that they looked like something caught in the instant of being crushed by unimaginable force. Before anyone could analyze further, the probe's feed flickered. The screen washed with interference, swirling like fog. A moment later, the feed died completely. The helmsman quietly muttered that the probe had been destroyed. The captain asked the sensor officer to confirm. Instead of answering, the officer's eyes widened. Multiple new objects had appeared near the fortress, like drifting debris pulled from internal chambers. But these objects were moving, slowly at first, then with deliberate intent. The crew watched as the shapes oriented toward Dawn's answer. There were dozens of them, then hundreds. None resembled traditional ships. They were clusters of segmented plates, spheres surrounded by spines, irregular lattices that pulsed faintly as though awakening. The pressure in the lower bands rose sharply. Many officers clutched their heads, wincing. The captain immediately ordered shields to full and weapons to standby, though she remained painfully aware that Dawn's answer was a scouting vessel, not built to wage war against constructs older than recorded history. The first cluster advanced, drifting without engine signatures, yet closing the distance with alarming speed. Its surface rippled, and an arc of energy leapt from one of its spines, striking the shield envelope with a thunderous impact that rattled the entire ship. The navigator yelled that the shield integrity had dropped by nearly a fifth from a single strike. Two more clusters rotated toward them, preparing to fire. The captain gave the only order left: full retreat, corridor drive activation immediately. The helmsman threw all power into forward thrust, though the drive could not be engaged until enough distance existed between the ship and the anomalous field around the fortress. Dawn's answer surged forward. The clusters pursued. Another arc struck the shields, then another. The crew struggled to maintain critical systems. Alarms howled across the command deck. The field anchor indicator in the corridor drive crept upward toward activation range. One cluster drifted directly into their path, blocking escape. Without waiting for permission, the weapons officer fired a high-intensity beam from the bow cannons. The blast struck the cluster. For a moment, its structure glowed white, then fractured into spiraling shards. The navigator predicted collision with the fragments. The captain ordered a roll maneuver. The ship tilted sharply, dodging the worst of the debris, though smaller pieces clanged against the hull. The pressure in the lower frequency bands continued to build. Several crew members collapsed. The psychologist shouted that extended exposure might incapacitate the entire ship. Dawn's answer swung around the last cluster, barring their path as the corridor drive anchor indicator finally reached activation threshold. The helmsman initiated the jump. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The crew stared at the screen, horrified, thinking the fortress had somehow captured them. Then space tore open ahead, a shimmering wound. The ship plunged through it. Every surface groaned. Every muscle tightened, and then all pressure vanished. Dawn's answer emerged into a calm region far from the fortress. Silence returned to the command deck, but it was a fragile, trembling silence filled with dazed breathing and stifled grief. The captain steadied herself and ordered damage reports. The hull had suffered minor impacts. Shields had collapsed to barely a tenth strength. Corridor drive coils had overheated, requiring several hours before another jump could be attempted. Life support had weathered the ordeal, though readings suggested a faint contamination of emotional stress patterns throughout the ship's neurological interfaces. The historian said softly that the fortress had not merely defended itself, it had woken. The captain asked for a full recording of all sensor data, all pressure readings, and all visual logs from the brief escape. She then ordered it transmitted to the Human Alliance's Science Division with maximum priority. Before the transmission could be sent, an officer shouted that a new distortion had appeared directly ahead of them. Not a corridor jump aperture, not a natural anomaly. It was a faint ripple in space, the same pattern they had detected near Warded Path during their first encounter with the invaders. The captain braced herself, expecting clusters to emerge. Instead, the ripple widened and a single vessel slipped through. Unlike the fortress, this ship was sleek, composed of interlocking plates that shimmered softly. Its design was almost graceful, though clearly alien. Its hull bore scars similar to those on the fortress, though far fewer. The crew stared in wary awe. The vessel broadcast nothing. No energy spikes, no signals. It simply drifted toward Dawn's answer. The captain ordered weapons held but not fired. The ship stopped a short distance away, as if respectfully keeping its distance. Then a soft pulse reached them. Not an attack, not pressure, something like an invitation. The psychologist said it felt calm. The historian leaned closer to the sensors, studying the patterns in the pulse. She muttered that this ship shared hull features with the constructs that had attacked them, but inverted, as if shaped by a related yet different culture. The vessel pulsed again, more insistent. The captain considered her options. She ordered a directional message transmitted using simple frequencies. She identified Dawn's answer, identified her crew as human explorers, and expressed no hostile intent. The alien vessel responded. Symbols flickered across their screens. Complex geometric sequences folded and unfolded. None resembled known language. But the ship's translation algorithms detected repeating structures that might serve as grammar. The historian pointed out that one sequence appeared repeatedly near patterns that resembled representations of motion or travel. Another sequence paired with symbols that looked like damage or threat. The alien vessel pulsed a third time, and the main display changed. Dawn's answer was shown as a small golden silhouette. The fortress appeared opposite it in colossal scale. Shapes resembling the attacking clusters swarmed from the fortress. Then the alien ship displayed itself standing between Dawn's answer and the fortress. The meaning was unmistakable. The historian whispered that the vessel was offering protection. Before the captain could reply, the alien ship displayed new symbols. They resembled spirals collapsing inward, paired with shapes breaking apart. The historian frowned, then stiffened. She said the symbols might represent something older, something consuming itself. Perhaps the fortress was dying, or awakening into something dangerous even to the aliens. The captain sent a cautious acknowledgement, indicating willingness to communicate further. The alien vessel pulsed gently, then it performed a maneuver that left the crew stunned. A section of its hull unfolded into a luminous corridor, not mechanical but organic-looking, as if grown rather than built. The corridor extended toward Dawn's answer, but did not touch it. It hovered, shimmering faintly. An invitation to board. The command deck fell silent as the crew absorbed the enormity of the offer. The alien vessel was not acting with hostility. It was reaching out, asking humans to meet it halfway. The historian murmured that the ancient war humanity had stumbled into was clearly far more complex than anyone had believed. The captain straightened. She had led her ship through deadly encounters, survived impossible odds, and now stood on the threshold of contact, unlike anything in human history. She issued one final order. A boarding team would prepare. They would enter the corridor, and humanity would finally meet one of the architects, or perhaps survivors, of a conflict older than stars. Then, with measured calm, she left the command deck to join the boarding party herself. The crew watched her go, knowing that whatever waited inside that luminous passage would reshape the destiny of every human alive. The boarding team gathered in the primary airlock, each member secured into full environment suits reinforced for uncharted biohazards and unknown atmospheres. Their equipment was not made for combat, but for survival and scientific scrutiny. though each carried defensive implements capable of protecting against unexpected aggression. The captain arrived last, fastening the final seal on her suit with deliberate calm. Every face around her reflected both fear and electric anticipation. Each knew they were about to cross into a domain no human had ever stepped into, a living vessel belonging to an intelligence that had once built machines capable of slaughtering entire colonies and tearing open hulls like paper. Yet this particular vessel had extended an invitation. The captain raised her voice slightly, addressing the team. She reminded them that their mission was first contact, not conquest, not intimidation, not interrogation. They would enter with respect, curiosity, and caution. Humanity had spent far too long reacting to attacks, fear, and mystery. This might be the first moment of understanding in a conflict that had swept them into a storm not of their making. Each member nodded. The inner airlock door sealed behind them with a resonant hum. The outer door eased open. The luminous corridor extended from the alien ship like a glowing bridge of flowing light. It shimmered gently, without flicker or distortion, as stable as solid steel, though clearly not made of metal. The team advanced cautiously. The captain placed her boot on the surface of the corridor first. It did not feel like a floor. Instead, it seemed like soft pressure, as if something intangible yet firm held her weight. She took another step. The others followed. The corridor responded with a faint pulsation through the soles of their suits, gentle and rhythmic, not unlike a greeting. As they crossed the gap between the two vessels, the view of open space around them intensified the surreal quality of the moment. Stars glittered on all sides. Dawn's answer floated behind them, small and vulnerable. Ahead, the alien vessel loomed like a living moon. The luminous corridor led directly into an opening that resembled a curved petal parting to allow passage. The petal-like structures shifted slightly as the team approached, widening until the entrance could admit them without difficulty. A soft breath of cool, faintly perfumed air washed over them as they entered. The captain motioned to halt. The team scanned the environment. Oxygen levels were within survivable range, though the composition held numerous trace elements unknown to human biology. The surfaces were smooth, patterned with natural contours rather than harsh angles. Soft light emanated from the walls themselves, shifting in slow waves. There were no visible fixtures, no obvious machinery. It resembled the interior of a living organism, shaped with intention and harmony rather than the rigid functionalism of mechanical engineering. The historian whispered, her voice subdued through the comm system, that the structure bore resemblance to ancient human speculation about starfaring biological intelligences civilizations that grew their vessels rather than forged them. The scientist conducting environmental scans pointed out that the walls reacted slightly to the presence of the boarding team. Areas pulsed with warmer color when approached, as though acknowledging the visitors. A soft vibration traveled through the floor, and the entrance sealed behind them. Several team members instinctively raised their weapons. The captain held out her hand sharply. No one fired. Before panic could spread, the wall ahead of them reshaped itself. Patterns rippled outward, then folded into a smooth aperture. The opening revealed a wide chamber. Inside, a figure waited. The stranger stood roughly 2 meters tall, though its form was slender and elongated. Its limbs were segmented in graceful arcs, each movement flowing like liquid. The being's skin shimmered with iridescence, shifting gently between pale blues and silvers. Its face was smooth and sculpted, lacking a mouth or nose in the human sense, though two dark, luminous eyes regarded them with intense attention. The air around the creature vibrated faintly, as if the atmosphere carried its thoughts. None of the boarding team moved. For several suspended seconds, they merely faced one another in stillness. The captain slowly lowered her weapon, letting it hang at her side. She took one step forward. The creature's eyes brightened softly. A vibration traveled through the chamber. Symbols appeared in midair, projected from the creature itself. These symbols resembled the geometric sequences the alien ship had shown earlier, but now they floated directly before the team, rotating in delicate patterns. The historian recorded everything, her voice trembling as she noted repetitions that likely indicated language structures. The creature extended an arm, palm open. The palm split along unseen seams, revealing inner strands of faintly luminescent filaments that arranged themselves into a specific pattern. The historian gasped in recognition. This pattern matched one of the sequences the alien vessel had displayed, the one related to travel or movement. Slowly, and with visible effort, the historian used her suit's projection tool to create a simple symbol in response, a representation of Dawn's answer, stylized and minimal. The creature observed the symbol intently. Then it projected its own representation of Dawn's answer, far more detailed, as though it had scanned the ship thoroughly. It rotated the image, highlighting aspects of the ship's structure before pairing it with another symbol, the one it had earlier used to represent danger and damage. The captain interpreted the gesture aloud. The alien believed Dawn's answer was threatened. The creature inclined its head slightly, as though acknowledging the captain's understanding. It then displayed an image of the fortress the humans had encountered. The fortress appeared even more colossal and ominous in the alien rendering, its jagged surfaces shown in far greater detail. The swirling clusters of constructs that had attacked Dawn's answer also appeared. The creature projected a series of symbols beside the fortress. These symbols spiraled inward, collapsing into a singular dark shape. The historian recognized these from earlier. The fortress was not simply a structure. It was part of something greater, something decaying or transforming. The creature stepped closer not threateningly, but with urgency. It projected an image of itself, then a second image of a similar being, then a third and fourth. These forms stood around the fortress as if in opposition, but then the images distorted. The forms broke apart. The fortress expanded, consuming the fragments. The creature's eyes dimmed. The message was unmistakable. The aliens' people had once fought the force, now awakening inside the fortress. But they had been losing, or had already lost. The boarding team exchanged troubled glances. The captain addressed the creature, her voice steady though she had no idea whether her words mattered. She said they wished to understand and, if possible, to avoid unnecessary conflict. The creature raised its hand again. Its palm reshaped itself, forming a new symbol. The historian studied it, her brow furrowed. She parsed parts of it, whispering slowly. It appeared to represent a cycle: creation, growth, collapse, return. The fortress was part of a repeating cycle, not a random threat. The aliens seemed to be asking whether humans intended to become part of that cycle or break it. A new vibration resonated through the chamber. The walls rippled slightly. The creature stepped backward, sensing something the humans could not yet detect. The chamber dimmed. The captain activated her helmet sensors. A surge of unknown energy had appeared outside the alien vessel. The alien rotated its head toward one wall. The wall became transparent, revealing the void outside. Dawn's answer floated nearby, bathed in the soft light of the alien ship. But beyond Dawn's answer, the stars flickered. Something vast was shifting. One of the clusters they had escaped had followed them, but this one was larger and pulsed with deeper, more aggressive energy. The alien's vessel reacted immediately. Light surged through the walls, rushing along veins or conduits that ignited in brilliant streams. The creature gestured urgently toward the humans. The historian translated the symbol that flashed beside the gesture. It meant stay within. The boarding team braced themselves as the alien vessel's hull reshaped from within, plates folding into defensive arcs. Outside, the cluster charged an energy strike, its spines glowing with malignant power. The alien ship fired first. A beam of luminous force erupted from its hull, striking the cluster and sending it spinning. But the cluster absorbed the impact with disturbing ease. It retaliated, unleashing a blast that slammed into the alien vessel and reverberated through the chamber walls. The humans staggered. The captain ordered everyone to stabilize themselves, though the alien near them seemed utterly focused on the battle. The alien projected rapid sequences of symbols to them. The historian interpreted them between deep breaths. The alien vessel alone could not withstand what hunted them. Dawn's answer needed to flee, and the humans needed to accept the alien's aid to survive. Outside, the cluster charged another blast. The alien vessel formed a barrier of layered plates, intercepting the strike, but the impact tore several plates free, sending them spinning into space as molten debris. The creature's eyes dimmed briefly, as though the damage pained it. The captain opened a channel to Dawn's answer, ordering the ship to ready for immediate withdrawal once the alien vessel created an opening. The alien stepped closer to the humans, projecting a final, complex pattern. It illustrated the fortress again, then the cluster attacking them, then a new form, an abstract depiction of something that looked like a gateway or path. The historian's breath caught. She said the alien was offering to guide them to a hidden refuge, a place where knowledge remained intact and where humanity might learn the origins of the cycle. The alien finished its projection just as the cluster loomed directly overhead, preparing a devastating attack that would annihilate everything nearby. The alien vessel folded its outer plates inward and released a pulse of energy so intense the humans felt it even through their suits. Space warped. A shimmering aperture opened behind Dawn's answer, a controlled portal. The captain shouted into her, for Dawn's answer to enter immediately. The boarding team clung to the walls as the alien vessel's structure trembled under the immense strain. Dawn's answer surged toward the aperture. The alien creature extended its arm toward the humans one final time, as if placing trust in them. Then the alien vessel redirected its entire power output into holding the aperture open. The cluster fired. The aperture pulsed wildly. Dawn's answer vanished through it. The humans felt the alien vessel shift violently. The captain barked for her team to grab onto any stable structure. Light consumed the chamber. The alien's eyes blazed with determination and unspoken urgency. Then, with a soundless eruption of force, the boarding team and the alien were pulled through the collapsing aperture together, carried into a destination no human had ever imagined. The moment the humans emerged from the aperture, they found themselves in a space that defied conventional description. Stars no longer followed the usual paths. Gravity behaved inconsistently, pulling in directions that made movement disorienting but not impossible. The alien vessel had brought them to what appeared to be a pocket dimension, a hidden crucible where space and time bent without breaking. The humans stumbled slightly as they adjusted, gripping walls that shimmered with iridescent energy and allowed them to walk even though their feet seemed to brush against both solid and liquid simultaneously. The captain took a deep breath, her mind racing with comprehension and disbelief. Around them, the alien vessel seemed to have shifted into a protective cocoon. Its surfaces pulsed softly, its contours blending with the strange dimension around them. The creature that had guided them moved beside the humans, gesturing toward what appeared to be a network of crystalline formations stretching in every direction, forming pathways and chambers that extended beyond sight. The historian squinted at the structures, noticing symbols etched into the crystalline surfaces that glowed faintly when approached. They were similar to those the alien had projected in the corridor, but far more intricate. The patterns were not language in the human sense. They were sequences, recursive geometries, layers of meaning embedded in forms rather than words. The alien gestured again, this time sweeping its arm along a series of conduits that led toward a massive chamber at the center of the formation. The humans followed, keeping close to its side, their curiosity overpowered by the lingering fear of the unknown. As they approached, the space widened. A vast chamber opened before them, impossibly tall and deep. At the center, suspended in an invisible field, floated what could only be described as a repository of knowledge. Spheres, prisms, and crystalline lattices rotated slowly in midair, each emanating faint light and a low vibration that resonated through the humans' bodies. The captain instinctively understood that this was more than information. It was history, strategy, and experience condensed into structures that could be perceived, studied, and perhaps even understood. The alien motioned for them to approach, though it kept a careful distance. The historian moved forward, scanning the spheres with sensors, her eyes wide with wonder. Data streamed into her equipment at speeds and densities beyond any human system. Images of the fortress, the clusters, and countless other structures appeared, some from distant star systems, others from deep time before humans had even existed. She realized that the alien civilization had fought this cycle of predatory structures for eons, learning, adapting, and documenting every failure and every victory. The captain asked if they were meant to study it, to learn from it, or to simply witness. The alien projected a series of patterns, and the historian interpreted them as confirmation. This was both a library and a strategy room. The aliens' people had created this hidden pocket dimension to preserve knowledge, to survive cycles that would otherwise consume them entirely. The humans understood that their own civilization could benefit from this repository, but they also understood the stakes. The fortress and its clusters were not merely threats, they were manifestations of a recurring force that could sweep across the galaxy, consuming unprepared civilizations. The captain approached one of the suspended spheres and extended her gloved hand toward it. The sphere responded immediately, emitting a low hum and a faint pulse that synchronized with her heartbeat. Information began to flow, not as words or data streams, but as impressions, tactics, engineering principles, histories of battles fought in both physical and conceptual realms, and hints at vulnerabilities. The humans absorbed as much as they could, knowing that the knowledge alone would not be enough. They needed time, resources, and allies to act. The alien guided them through the chamber, revealing more spheres that contained records of other worlds, of species that had risen and fallen, of technologies used both to destroy and to protect. It was a gallery of survival and loss. And everywhere, one pattern repeated: adaptation, unity, and the will to resist the consuming force. As the humans explored, the alien communicated in more complex sequences, and the historian realized that it was not merely teaching them, it was offering a choice. The humans could take the knowledge and attempt to fight, or they could retreat and allow the cycle to continue, as countless other civilizations had before. The captain understood the weight of the decision. Humanity had survived against odds that should have destroyed them repeatedly. Now they were being given an opportunity not merely to survive, but to rise and act with foresight against an ancient predator. The captain turned to her team. Each member had absorbed a measure of the knowledge, enough to understand the implications, enough to make informed decisions. The alien observed silently, waiting. The captain nodded to them and then back to the alien. With a steady voice, she declared humanity's choice. They would fight, they would learn, and they would warn every world that could be warned, every system that could be defended. The alien's eyes brightened subtly, and the surrounding chamber pulsed in approval. It had been waiting for such a decision, one that demonstrated both courage and responsibility. The humans spent hours, or perhaps days' time, had little meaning here, studying the repository, absorbing tactics, understanding structures of predation, learning methods to counter the clusters, and strategies to neutralize the fortress. They discovered weaknesses, potential alliances, and the principle that the cycle could be interrupted if civilizations acted collectively and intelligently. The alien remained their guide, teaching subtle lessons that went beyond data, beyond history, into understanding the patterns of life, conflict, and adaptation on a cosmic scale. At last, the captain turned to the alien one final time. She asked how they could return to their own space, ready to apply what they had learned. The alien extended a limb toward one of the apertures that had brought them here. Light folded around the humans as the alien's power stabilized a corridor back to normal space. The captain led her team through, carrying the weight of knowledge and responsibility with them. They emerged near Dawn's answer, which had drifted in orbit, systems stabilized, crew shaken but ready. The stars beyond seemed the same as before, yet the humans now saw them differently. Every point of light could be a potential ally, a threat, or a witness. The alien vessel hovered briefly, projecting one final series of symbols. The historian interpreted them: prepare, unite, resist, endure. Then the vessel slipped into the void, leaving humanity with the tools and understanding necessary to confront a force that had consumed civilizations across eons. The captain took a deep breath and spoke to her crew, her voice carrying through the corridors of Dawn's answer. They had survived the immediate threat. They had gained knowledge beyond imagining. And they had a mission: to warn, to prepare, and to act. Humanity would not fall quietly. They would rise. And they would ensure that the cycle of consumption, destruction, and repetition would meet an obstacle unlike any it had ever encountered. The crew moved with renewed purpose, preparing to transmit warnings to other colonies and to coordinate defenses, aware that the path ahead was long and dangerous. But for the first time, they understood that survival was not merely reactive. Humanity had allies, knowledge, and a chance to shape the cycle, to alter the course of a force older than the stars themselves. The captain watched the alien vessel disappear into the distance, its presence lingering like a faint resonance in the minds of all who had walked within its corridors. She clenched her fists, resolved to ensure that the warning given by the being on the shatter plane, the knowledge from the pocket dimension, and the courage of her crew would forge a new chapter for humanity. Humanity had been challenged by forces it barely understood. But now, armed with knowledge, unity, and determination, it would rise. The stars themselves would witness the defiance, and the cycle that had consumed countless civilizations would finally encounter a species that would not break, that would not yield, that would fight with unyielding will. Humanity had begun its ascent, and the universe would never be the same again.